I will pass somebody who is festooned with Stitch. I think, should I identify myself? Once in a while, I will. If I just vibe out that it wouldn't be weird to like, hey, suddenly like accost somebody. I couldn't have been luckier. When I got to Disney animation, the only job available was in visual development. And so I worked in that department for many months before I finally was asked if I wanted to try storyboarding. I only knew storyboarding from Saturday morning cartoons. That's where I started. I had a job for 3 years at Marvel Productions. Of course, in feature animation, it's entirely different, but I didn't understand that. So I turned them down and said, no, 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 I can't. I can't storyboard. And the producer for Rescuers Down Under came back to me. I had done these visual development sketches for how the mice would send this radio signal from Australia all the way to New York. And he came back to me and he said, could you just do all the drawings that come in between the ones that you did? And I said, oh, I can do that. Once I got all the drawings done, I showed the drawings by flipping through them. And he said, hey, could you put these up on a storyboard so we could see them all at once? And I said, oh, yeah, I can do that. All right. And I did that. And then he said, would you take a stick and point at them and show them to our story crew and the directors? And I said, sure, I can do that. I was pitching and didn't realize it. And he basically tricked me into boarding. I worked on Beauty and the Beast. I worked on Aladdin and Mulan. And I learned how to negotiate and how to shape a story from I think they're the very best.
He can talk. Say hello.
Hello? Dogs can't talk, dear.
He did.
I had just finished working on Mulan, and a very formative film as far as like just learning a lot of stuff. Some things that worked really well, some things that didn't work as well, that we took a lot of lessons away from that film. And when I started Lilo and Stitch, one of the things I did have on my mind is I want to create a character that's really, again, pervasive. I want him to be like out there all the time. I had been going through my boxes of drawings, and I have that drawing of that character from, about 15 years before I pitched it to Disney. And this is the character that I drew. And it was just this monster. And it was just this amalgam of, different creature parts. And after I finished Mulan, I was still in Florida and Tom Schumacher came out to visit. He was president of feature animation. And he said, is there anything that you might want to direct? And I remembered that story and I thought, yeah, let me go back and get it all ready and I'll show it to you. And as I was figuring it all out, I drew this. And so this is the first drawing of Stitch. And here's the first drawing of Lilo. And then here's the very first drawing of them both. Here's the drawing of the spaceship that I did.
Good dog.
I can't tell you how many times a day I see people with some Stitch something on them. I will pass somebody who is festooned with Stitch. I think, should I identify myself? Once in a while, I will. If I just vibe out that it wouldn't be weird to like, hey, suddenly like accost somebody.
You came back.
Nobody gets left behind.
When I was a kid, my grandmother never missed a broadcast of the Oscars. And so an enduring memory of mine is always sitting in the living room and watching television, watching the Oscars with my grandmother. And at that point, I was so disappointed that she wasn't alive to see that. And I thought, oh my gosh, no matter what, I'll at least be there in the audience when whatever happens. And I've had not the best luck with the other movies that were out the same time. That year was Miyazaki's Spirited Away. So, it didn't really bother writing an acceptance speech. How to Train Your Dragon for Dean and I was our crash course in all things CG. I was actually at DreamWorks developing the Croods, and I was asked to take over on How to Train Your Dragon. They were switching directions. So I jumped onto that production mid-production. So a lot of the models had already been built. The characters had largely been built, etc. So it was really, really good because I didn't have to start at the very beginning. The only character that we built from scratch was Toothless, who we were going to revise. There was an issue with the original design. And we thought in order for the story to work, we're going to have to change Toothless's design, which we did. So that one I got to watch like start to finish. It was kind of a rush job, but the artists did a brilliant job of designing and rigging him.
All right, bud, we gotta get out of here. Now.
It's very normal in animation to record people by themselves. One of the reasons is it's a very, very long process, and so people are literally working on other films whilst we're doing our bit. And we had recorded most of the voices, and then we had this opportunity to be in New York and get the three lead characters together in 2 days, and we jumped at the chance. We wanted that kind of interaction. It was okay with us that if they talked over each other, that would happen, like being on a real set. So we were able to get Hiccup, Toothless, and Stoic all together in every combination over the course of 2 days. And those recordings superseded all the others. If you have the opportunity to get someone who has or is on Broadway, it's a real good get, because there's just something, I never even understood why, but there is something about working on the stage, maybe the projection, the scale of it. It's really good for animation. One of the things I learned is to let people know, like, you can push it, because we're going to leave this session without your head. We're going to leave with your voice. We do make recordings. We have a lipstick camera running during the recording, because the animators can take cues from the actor. But predominantly, of course, we leave with just their voice. And so risk going too far, risk going too broad. And if it does, for some reason, cross a line, I'll pull you back. But it's okay to just push it, and you rarely, I think, really have to pull anybody back, because I think that broadness is very good for what we're doing.
All right, Dad, get him. Go get him. Okay, now you got him right. Oh, man, they're really getting out, Dad.
I'm loving this.
One of the things I learned was to really set the parameters right away. At the beginning of How to Train Your Dragon, we began by just saying, this is Burke. This is who I am. This is what's going on. I repeated that on the Croods, because it was very important that mortality had to be a reality to the audience, because without that risk being palpable and present, the story wouldn't work. If these guys were like Wile E. Coyote and the Roadrunner, and they fall off a cliff and just bounce back, then there would be no stakes and there would be no risk, and the story wouldn't work. So right away, we said to the audience, we had neighbors, but they're gone. And this is why they're all gone. And we did it with comedy, but we showed all these different neighbors, not making it. And I found out in our very first test screening that really stuck. One of the very first questions we asked the audience was about, the world, and they said, "Oh, it's dangerous," because all these neighbors didn't do so well. And I remember how well that stuck with the audience.
You're a lot like your daughter.
Oh, great. Now he's broken.
I was with Howard Ashman. I was so lucky. And he said, if I want the audience to really remember something, I say it 3 times in quick succession. The sea witch says to Ariel, you got 3 days. Got it? 3 days. Now, by sunset on the 3rd day. So 3, 3, 3. She said it and people remembered. And that came in handy on Lilo and Stitch, because the scene where the social worker visits, and then as soon as he leaves, Nani chases Lilo. She screams, Nani chases her, she grabs her, Lilo bites her, and then she runs up to her room. They have this big fight. And our first test screening, a lot of people said, I don't like the way that Lilo's mom interacts with her. And I was like, oh my gosh, they didn't register that that's not her mom. So I rewrote the scene after the fight where she comes up to Lilo's room, and 3 times in quick succession she says,
We're sisters. I like you better as a sister than a mom. And you like me better as a sister than a rabbit, right?
So sister, 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 I used what Howard told me, and nobody ever gave us that note again.
Was this task accomplished to your satisfaction?
I really had to take everything very seriously. Not that I wouldn't if I had a director, but I think there's a certain safety net when you have another person there that can catch things that maybe you don't catch. This time, it was really all on me. And I was so nervous about really finishing it that I never really moved into my office. If you had walked into my office in the 3rd year of production, it would look like I'd moved in just yesterday. I was always ready to be thrown out just because I was not confident. I knew I was going to do my best. I think I pulled it off because I was calling on everything I'd learned. For 35 years in this whole thing or plus, I was calling on every little bit of it to make sure that I didn't miss anything. And I definitely could not have pulled this off had I not had the triumphs and mistakes and the learning curve that I had.
A Rosm always completes its task.
You get a toolbox eventually that you start calling on. It's legitimate directing, it's legitimate storytelling. I think people sometimes don't realize how much work goes into stories in these feature films. We work on them, obviously for years, trying to get them as simple as possible, because in simplicity there is strength. Not to the point where they're impoverished in any way, but making sure that everything's clear, everything flows, everything has good timing. With The Wild Robot, the adaptation from Peter Brown's book, for me, it was very important that I clear out enough space that the film feels like it is unspooling at its own pace. I didn't want it to feel like it was on a schedule. She does have this deadline of getting her Gosling off the island by fall, but it's like months.
Right.
It's not like, it's not like she's, rushing for a train or anything like that. So we're never going to get that, like that sort of kind of crazy urgency. And I employed a lot of things that I learned on, Mulan and How to Train Your Dragon about looking at things structurally before I allow myself to have the more sort of character fun. Because sometimes you can skip the structure and get into the fun bit, and then you realize later, oop, I should have fixed this, right? There will always be a little back and forth, but attending to the structure, I've learned, is going to really help you out. It's going to allow more fun really later if you've got a strong structure that is as simple as you can make it.
On a scale of 1 to 10, where 10 is most satisfied and 1 is least, how would you rate my performance?